Hi, welcome back. So now I am interested in how you as a Tableau professional actually start exploring a data set.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the fun thing about Tableau is that there are 1,000,001 ways to explore data. You can start with a question that you have and then try to answer that question in the data. Or you can start just by looking at the dimensions and measures that you have and dragging those out onto the canvas and changing things around and changing the aggregation and starting to explore. And everyone has a different process. You can invent your own process. I often invent new processes. But one of the first things that I usually do is I take a look at the data that I'm working with, because often it wasn't data that I personally collected. In this case, I've brought a data set that the UN collected on refugee data. So we're looking at asylum seekers, where they came from, where they ended up, when they ended up in those countries. And I've already taken a step to clean up the data. Often that's a necessary step before you start visualizing it. And in this case, it was really easy. I just checked this checkbox to clean it with our data interpreter, and that took away a few rows in the beginning that weren't related to the rest of the data set. So then I'm going to open up a sheet and I'm going to start asking questions. So one of the things I want to know is how many people are in this data set, right? How many people are we talking about here? So I'm going to drag this over onto the canvas, and I can see that we're talking about a bit over 8 million asylum seekers. Okay, so that's interesting. Now I want to know, where did these people come from? And so I'm going to drag their origin onto the columns. Now, this is a little bit difficult for me to see. It would be helpful if I could rotate it. So I'm going to swap the axes here, and then I'm going to sort the data. And now I can start to see a story, and I can start to see where these asylum seekers originated.
Yeah, that's interesting. So now that at this point, how would you say use filters to keep digging into the data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Tableau makes it really easy to narrow down your data and drill in and understand the data from different perspectives. So in this case, for example, I have a date that might be interesting to explore. So I'm going to show a filter for the date, and then instead of checkboxes, I want to have a single value list. And now I can start to see trends and ask questions. For example, the data in 1999 looks different than the data in 2008. And so now I can start to say, what was it that caused those changes, and what can I learn from this data set?
Right. So now that we're diving deeper with the filters and all that, how would you actually start making this into a dashboard so that you can share this interesting stories with others?
Yeah, so dashboard is a series of parts that when combined are greater than the whole, right? So a number of visualizations that could be combined to tell a different story or show you a different perspective of your data. So here I have a bar chart, but this is geographic data. So it might also be interesting to look at it as a map. So here I have a dimension that shows the country, and I'm going to click on a little show me section in the corner here that's going to suggest some visualizations. And here it's selected a map. So if I add this map, it is now showing me where asylum seekers ended up. All of the countries that took in asylum seekers are represented by a single dot. But I also want to know how many asylum seekers went to each country. So I might take this number of asylum seekers and drag this onto color. And now we can start to see where there were some hotspots. So it looks like Germany is a hotspot, and actually all of Europe looks kind of interesting. So I'm going to zoom in on Europe, and now I can start to see a geographic story emerge. Now, there's also a time dimension in this data set that's interesting to explore. And so one of the things that I could do is I could look at the number of asylum seekers, and then I could look at the date, okay? And see Tableau automatically change that into a line chart for me, because a line is a really good way to explore dates. And now this date actually also comes with a built-in hierarchy. And what that means is I see a plus button here, and that means that I can drill down further to quarter or to, for example, month. and I can start to see the data in different ways and from different perspectives. Now, if I wanted to turn this into a dashboard, I would tap on the new dashboard icon here, and here I have sheets that are in the corner for me, and I can start dragging those onto my dashboard. And if I hover over them, I see a little thumbnail that helps me know what I'm looking at. So I'm going to drag that sheet here. I'm going to drag the map out on top, and then I'm going to drag this line chart to the side. Now, I can't quite see everything that's going on, so I'm going to change this from fixed size to automatic. And then there are a couple of things that I want to do here. I want to take away these titles. They're not really helping me right now. So we'll remove those. And then we'll remove this. And then I want to, one of the other cool things that you can do with Tableau is that you can use visualizations as filters. So that's another really interesting thing that you can do with filters. So here we have filters for dates, but we can also filter by country. So what I can do is I can click on this button to use as a filter, and then I can take this filter for date and I can apply to all of the worksheets using this data source. Okay, and then I'm going to do a simple customization here. I'm also going to float this. I'm going to change it to a drop down, and then I will resize it. I'll put it on the map here, and I'll take this away. Okay, and now we have a visualization, and if I put that into full screen mode, you have this beautiful view where you can start to explore data, right? So now I can see what's happening in France in 2008 versus 2014, for example, right? And you can start really digging in and asking questions and exploring in a very rich way.
Great. That's really cool. I like that. Okay, so these are dashboards, but Tableau also lets you build stories, right? So what's the difference between a story and a dashboard, and when would you use one rather than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I like to think of it as a story has a narrative and it has a sequence. You want people to understand the information in a particular order. So with a dashboard, it gives you an overview of what's going on. So I think of it kind of like, you show up at the food truck and there's the menu on the side and you want a picture of what all the different options are. And maybe you're only interested in appetizers right now. It's really easy for you to find that appetizer section and just get something small. A story, on the other hand, is more like a comic book. You really want to understand the history and context and understand how you came to a particular conclusion. So you can also build stories in Tableau. So I'm going to click on the New Story button, and maybe I want to tell the story of how I arrived at a particular insight. So here I can take the sheets and dashboards and combine them into stories. So maybe I start with this sheet and I add it here and I add a caption. This is the first part of my story. And then I can take another sheet and I can add a new story point and add a caption. Here's where I found this insight. And you can also add dashboards as well, right? And in this case, we're also going to move this, change this to automatic so I can see everything that's going on. And when we go to our story, we can start by sharing the first part of the story and then move people along in sequence so that they understand your insights.